Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Guidelines International Network North America webinar series for January 2016. This is Sandy Lewis. I'm your chair this year, and I'm very pleased to welcome to our program today Sue Huckson, who is a member of the International Organization's Board of Trustees. There's a picture of her showing on your screen now. And she's going to give us a presentation on the value and benefits of being a member of GIN, but also activities that you may not know about, offerings on our website or through some of the working groups or the communities. So even people who have been members for many years may not know about all of the resources that are available through the Guidelines International Network. And we thought it would be helpful for everybody to get a bit of experience with some of these offerings. So Sue is going to take us through that in just a few minutes. I wanted to remind everybody that you are all muted. We will have a Q&A in a few minutes, well, in about an hour. We'll let Sue finish her presentation, then we'll have a Q&A. And at that time, you will not be able to audibly ask your questions. So I would ask you to please type your questions into the chat box, which is in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. I will be collating those questions, and I will moderate the Q&A at the end after the presentation today. So I think we are ready to begin. Let me start with a brief introduction. So I've known Sue Huckson for a long time. She's a tremendous supporter of GIN and the activities of GIN. I've learned a tremendous amount from her. Although she claims to be about health promotion, she's very well known for her work in guideline implementation. And I would encourage all of you to try to learn from her in that regard. It was very helpful to me. Sue comes to us from Australia, and she is involved in the Australia and New Zealand Intensive Care Society. She's the manager of the Center of Outcomes and Resource and Evaluation. And as I mentioned before, she is a member of the Board of Trustees of the International Organization, our parent organization, the Guidelines International Network. She's chair of the GIN Australian New Zealand Regional Community, and she is liaison to GIN Africa, one of the newest of the communities. And I'm sure she'll talk more about all of that during her presentation. So with that, let me turn this over to Sue, and you can begin at any time, Sue.
Oh, thank you, Sandy. Thank you for that introduction. And on the screen where I can see people who have joined, I can already see people who I've engaged with for the many years that I've been involved with GIN. And it's quite a nice kind of introduction in a sense about what a network is. And it's about people, it's about connecting people. One of the things I did for many years was manage an emergency community of practice across Australia, and that was about connecting people and getting people engaged in activities and working directly with others who've got interests in common. And so I always see GIN in that light. It's about a community, if you like, of people who are all interested or have a particular common purpose. So that's where I feel GIN's about. And I think a lot of people within networks are people and like to engage with others, and that's what makes it work as well. So in terms of GIN, I just thought I'd start with what the key kind of mission is for GIN. I'm not sure if there are people on the line who are new to GIN, who are not sure about the purpose of GIN, but just this is what, just to frame it, if you like, in some context. So it's a global network. You can see the breadth of exposure, if you like, or connection across the world. Its mission is to lead and strengthen and support the collaboration, and that while they're all well and good in words, collaboration doesn't actually happen until people are active in it. There has to be some doing, and that's what makes the network. And it's certainly where the drive that I think bring to GIN. It's about the membership and looking back. So what's good for the membership will always be good for GIN. And then also, I guess at the bottom of all of this, and I think we're all interested in this, is to improve the quality of healthcare. And by having tools and guidelines that package up that information in some way to make that work hopefully more effective and easier. So that's a bit, if you like, about the context of GIN. I see GIN, the potential for GIN, as the leader. There is no other organisation that I'm aware of that connects people from all walks of or all domains within the guideline sphere, if you like, to work together. So bringing the researchers, the implementers, the guideline developers, and certainly one of my other roles up to recently was the chair of the membership committee, and what we started to see was a lot of other individuals coming to GIN with different skills wanting to contribute. So people with an interest in informatics, for example, looking at how can they start to work with guidelines and help make that work more effective for people who are working in the space of guidelines. And so it was becoming quite interesting and broadening out into public health as well. And more recently there were the organisations around environmental medicine. And, so I think that was really interesting. There's a shift, if you like, or perhaps not a shift, but a growth into other aspects of health, thinking of health more broadly rather than just the clinical aspect of health. So let's start with going through. I'm using the website to lead the discussion, and they're brief, but it will take the conversation in all sorts of directions. So the first part is becoming part of the GIN network. And so the screen, and you can see there it's about, and I've chosen this slide, network and collaborate, and that's the whole. For me, that's kind of at the crux of things. So if we go into the next slide, it's about membership and becoming a GIN member. And so I think just to, before we go into more of the detail, just to cover off what the membership structure is for those that don't know around about GIN. And I'm not sure if there are people who are organisational members on the line or are employed by organisations who are members of GIN. And I'll just make the point, if you're interested in being more active within GIN, you perhaps need to find out if your organisation is a member of GIN, because you'll be able to access into the website and be part of that community. And then there are individual members. I'm an individual member, and as an individual member, and I guess I say that because it's not all about organisations. Individuals can make a mark, can be involved as much as they want within the network as well, and then there are other benefits and opportunities for organisations. I'm just getting an error message on my computer. I'm just going to proceed and ignore that. So just in terms of the organisational members, and so you can have, and again it's related to fees. So a smaller organisation who might have 10 or less employees, and then a larger organisation is greater than 10 employees, and then in those larger organisations, the organisation can have 100 of their team, whoever, if you've got an organisation as big as that, being engaged in GIN. So if you're a very large organisation, it's actually very cost effective, if you like, and want to encourage people to be part part of GIN. And then it's interesting, I think, from an organisational perspective. So from an organisation to be part of GIN, this is about visibility, this is about leadership in the space and being engaged with other organisations. So, it's that connector role that GIN provides. But then it's in any network and in any activity, it's the individuals that do the work, and it's the individuals that are on the working groups and in the communities and create that link as well. It's quite an interesting, I think, relationship. And then there are individual members, and within that there are different categories. There are benefits for low and middle income countries, consumers, students, etc. So I'll just go through the benefits and then we can get on to a bit more of the more interesting stuff, I think. So I'm going to read some of these things, otherwise I'll forget, but bear with me. So for an organisational membership, it's focusing on non-for-profit organisations. For-profit organisations can join GIN. That classification is an associate membership, and that they get other benefits about being able to promote within reason their organisation. So the membership, to become a associate membership, there's a lot more scrutiny around that. Obviously, we wouldn't be looking at pharma, we wouldn't be looking at those sorts of organisations to be involved in GIN, and there's a very strong and rigorous conflict of interest process that sits under that, the workings of GIN, within all of the working groups and communities as well. So just in terms of the organisational membership, that the organisation, and I've just mentioned it, there are opportunities, I think, to promote the organisation itself, and that gives it visibility. I've spoken about access to the GIN library and access to all other staff. There's free access to the Cochrane Library. Now that's both for individual and organisational members. And I've just checked because in Australia the NHMRC supports the Cochrane Library in Australia. Everybody has access to it, and that's not the case, I understand, in the US. I had a look earlier, and I think Wyoming has access and a couple of other states, but there's not broad access to Cochrane. And I think if you're in the guideline space, access to Cochrane is essential. So, there is kind of the most important benefit, I think, for if you're a guideline developer in areas that don't have access to Cochrane, that the membership of GIN provides that. We do have a partnership also with Dynamed, and Dynamed will provide access up to 5 staff members within an organisation. So that again is a very tangible benefit. Being the ability or access to any of the activities within GIN is open to members. The cost discounts for fees for the conferences and other events that might be supported, and I think that when North America have the conference, the membership, there's a discount for GIN members on that. Organisational members are able to stand for the board, which again is important. This is about the network and the community having a voice at that level, and it's certainly something I've been on the board now for 3 years. I've got another 2-year term, and being able to have those conversations and help shape some of the direction for GIN is a privilege for me. And for me, it's always about representing the network at that level. And then some organisations may be part of, for instance, in Saudi, the Saudi government also bought access to the National Library, the GIN Library. So the GIN Library, just the library itself, is available to the individuals within Saudi because they've bought the access to the library, and I think that that's the same in Norway as well. So there are opportunities there. And then again, for an individual, generally all of the same benefits except those that pertain to being an organisation. You get one login, you're able to be involved in all of the working groups, you get a reduced conference fee, you get access to the Cochrane Library, and you have free individual access to Dynamed. So that, I think often some of these benefits get lost when you go into the website, but they are very tangible. And I think, and if you're a person that does the numbers around the membership fee, I think it shows value for money. And I just did some figures because on the website the membership fees are all in euros, and given the way the dollar is at the moment, the US is much more advantaged than we are, for instance. But for an individual membership at the US rate, it's about $271 a year, and for consumers and students, $135, and for low middle income individuals, $65 a year. So I think that that's quite reasonable. I'm sorry, I've just been... okay, whoops. I'm having a computer error. So I'm going to move on to the next slide, please. Okay. All right, my computer has just died a little bit, so the next slide is... oh, I'm sorry about this, it's just...
Sue, we can still hear you, and we can see your slides.
Yes, they're not... my computer has... it's lost its network connection. I'm just not sure what's happening here. So... oh. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. We're on the slide about working groups.
Okay, working groups. I know most of this by heart, so I can, if you can tell me and lead me through the slides, because I can't see the slides on my computer. So the working groups, you can see on that slide, there's a huge list of working groups on that. So that shows the diversity of the things that you can be available or are available to you. And that, being part of GIN is you get out what you put into the activities, and sometimes it might be, and everyone's busy from time to time, and what I find is there'll be a burst when I've got more time and I can be really engaged in a group, and there'll be times where I'll be less engaged, and you do have that opportunity, and I think most of the working groups are really encouraged that people want to be engaged. And so I'm engaged in the implementation working group. I've been involved with Anna Gagliardi. We've co-authored papers, been really instrumental in developing checklists around implementation and doing some other work. Catherine Marshall and I have been offering mentoring for implementation, and so that there are opportunities to be testing all sorts of different ways and working with Anna. The more recent working groups that I think are really interesting is the overdiagnosis working group with Paul Glasio, who works out of Bond University, and even just yesterday a conversation with Ina, who's the chair of the board, is saying what's the space for finding what the role is for GIN in this overdiagnosis space, what's that link, and overlap, if you like, in terms of guidelines. And then the discussion went to, well, actually the guideline space is changing and we need to be changing with that as well. So, just that forward thinking around where guidelines are moving towards. Other groups that people might be interested in is the rapid review group. Everyone is looking at how do we review guidelines and the evidence more quickly so that we can be, or groups can be more, I don't want to say reactive and being reactive, but being responsive is the right word to changes in the evidence and how that might work. And so there, you see there, I think there are at least 10 working groups in there. The other one that I'm supporting at the moment is the Low and Middle Income Working Group, which has representation now from about probably 8 different low and middle income countries, and looking about what they need and what we can all learn from low and middle income countries about guidelines and implementation, and some are very sophisticated and others are just starting out, and there's a great thirst in these countries for support and work, and that's led by Joseph Matthew from India. That group's already done a survey. It was presented at GIN last year. Now we're talking about going more deeply into that survey and looking to publish that piece of work. And so this is giving that region, or a more broader region, opportunity to be working and also having a voice, if you like, at GIN, and I think that's very exciting. So, so there's a lot of groups. There's the adaptation group. So there's, in terms of scope, there's lots of opportunities to find something of interest within that list. And on the website, there's a contact, and if you're interested, it's an email to the chair or even to the GIN Secretariat, who's, you might be, I'm interested, could you put me in touch with? And it would be as easy as that to start to join a working group. So, Sandy, the next slide.
So the next slide is on the regional communities.
The regional communities, you'll see there are 4 regional communities. We're on top only because we start with an A, I think. So it's the Australian-New Zealand regional community. We're very new, and we have 11 organisations, and I think something like 23 individual members, but we have got huge potential. All of the colleges and other organisations within this region, so it's quite exciting. The first piece of work that we're doing is doing a submission on providing the NHMRC, which is our national research organisation, has put out a discussion paper on guidelines, and that we are taking a position to put a submission in and make a comment on that paper. So here's an opportunity again to show how regional groups can have a voice, and a collective voice, if you like, and being supported by GIN, which is fantastic. And then the next couple of slides are showing the examples of the web pages of the North America group, and that's also how Sandy, in the final one, has put up an update. And so those that information is about being able to broadcast, if you like, all of the activities. The North America group is the one that's been active for the longest period of time. It is supported. That also has the support of the New York Academy of Medicine. I think that's how, I hope I've said that right as well. And support, in a sense, from some of the larger organisations in the US, and we don't have that. I think it's a huge advantage to have that more institutional, even if it may not be financial, but certainly in the philosophy of Gin North America, which is great. So it's a really good example to show how the communities work. The Nordic community is also well connected with an institution and operates slightly differently. And then the newest one is the African Regional Group, which is well connected. Now we have a partnership with Cochrane. Gin has a partnership with Cochrane. That what we find is within the groups there's a lot of crossover of people, and the individual who's leading the African group is also a member of Cochrane. He's a very active GP from Cameroon, and is really trying to make some inroads, and working with also an individual from Kenya who works on community development related to HIV and within the region. Again, really important areas and topics that we should be supporting in terms of gin. So it's a very exciting way to start to reach out to these, be an outreach, if you like, to these other regional areas. But I think I'll test being chair of the Australian New Zealand group, and Sandy's chair, and Tom is also on the line and involved, is that it's hard work, and that what we do need is the support of the community to make it effective for everybody. So again, it's that ongoing collaboration and support of one's colleagues, if you like. So Sandy, next slide.
So the next slide is, there's a couple on Gin North America, one on our sort of history, and then one on a report that was in the Engine newsletter recently. And you want to probably move on to the next slide after that, which would be some thoughts from members. Would you like me to read those?
And it's come up now.
Okay.
Somebody's fixed the problem. So as I was putting the slides together, I recalled that I was asked to do an editorial for Engine, which is the newsletter from Gin, and again, my focus is always about the membership. So what I decided to do is ask members what they wanted, what they felt. So these are people within and I think everyone can read those comments, but within Gin, about the value that they got out of Gin. And so again, it was giving the network a voice, if you like, to be able to express that. And while I won't read them all, the ones that, the two that I will kind of pick up on, one, Rodrigo Padro Taragio, I think that's how you say his name, from Colombia. And so talking about his institution, the Colombian Ministry of Health, and how they worked with people within Gin to develop their implementation manual. And so the opportunity to work with others, and even if it's just an organisational efficiency exercise, it would have saved a huge amount of time just working with others who already had that experience. You would get a product that had a broad perspective of how other people did things, and I suspect, I haven't actually seen it, but it would be an amazing product that they've got. And so I thought that was a really nice example. And the other one, Karina leads the Gin Public Group from Germany, and she it's a long piece, but she encapsulates in that comment about everything about what it means to be a member of gin. It's about that connection. It's about being what gin brings to her personally and professionally, the connections with people and individuals. And, I'll relate my story is because I can see the list of participants, and Peter Wire is on the line, I can see, and Peter and I go back, I think, to 2007, and from a very early conversation about emergency working within or doing work and a partnership with emergency care in gin, and that relationship goes back, all those years, and other people that I can see on the list as well. There are many examples for that. But I just wanted to break there because I'm talking a lot, and just when we were designing this webinar, I thought it was important that Tom and Sandy also get an opportunity to share with you about what it means to them about membership, and so you get yet a different perspective. So Sandy, would you like to just say a few words?
Sure. So as many of you know, I used to work at the American College of Chest Physicians, and I was involved in Gin North America since 2007 when I attended my first conference in Toronto. I believed from that point on, I found it eye-opening to learn so much about the field that I was working in, and I realized from that moment on that this was a source of professional education for me. So like physicians do continuing medical education, this was my continuing professional education. And then from that moment on, I believe that part of my job responsibility should include bringing this knowledge back to my colleagues on staff and the membership of the college, and that I should work with the committee that oversaw the development of guidelines and also the panels to try to change policies and procedures in such a way that we could bring this evolving science of guideline development into our work so that we could be better at what we were doing, so that we could keep up with the evolution in the methodologies and the science as it was taking place, as it was unwinding in front of us. And I felt that these conferences were a tremendous source of information. But it goes beyond the conferences. It goes into some of the resources that you've seen and that you can access online. But also it gets back to what Sue was talking about with the networking idea. So one day, this was probably around 2010, 2011, we were contemplating the idea of living guidelines, but it was overwhelming to think about how we could possibly do that. How could we accomplish living guidelines? And I was overwhelmed. We were all overwhelmed. And I decided to call a colleague and friend of mine, Catherine Marshall, who I had met at previous gin conferences, who's from New Zealand, and ask her what she knew and if she could connect me to the right people. And it seemed to me that if she didn't know herself, she might know who she could connect me to, which was exactly right, because Catherine knew people in Australia who had been doing some investigations into the concepts. They connected me to people in Scotland at Sign who had actually done a little bit of preliminary work in that area, and largely their work established what some of the barriers and challenges would be. But that was great because that allowed me to have this list of barriers and challenges that we could just start to address one by one. And I think much of the progress that we made during those years was because of information that I was able to collect as staff by attending these conferences, by speaking and networking with the members, and using other resources that were available to me as a member of GIN. Tom, do you want to share your experiences now?
Yeah, thank you. Like you and I think many others in the U.S., network, the Guidelines International Network, the North American regional community. I keep saying chapter, but I'm going to change my language, Sue, so that I'm consistent. It's a regional community. My first GIN conference was in 2007, and I heard about this through our guideline chair at the time, who was practicing in Toronto. She was a neurologist, movement disorder neurologist. Canada, as many of you know, has been big in guideline development, dissemination, implementation, and using guidelines as part of their healthcare system. And she alerted me and my boss at the time to this conference, and only one of us could go. She had a conflict, and I went. And Sandy, like you said, it was eye-opening. It is extremely beneficial for networking. There's no doubt about that. Many people that I see in the participant list and that are in my shortcuts on my iPhone are many individuals who I work with in guideline development and through the Council of Medical Specialty Societies, and in many different walks of life in our medical professional societies and our disciplines. And before I attended GIN, I kind of looked at the American Academy of Neurology as a little bit of a microcosm. We're a nonprofit organization. We're a large nonprofit. We have a foundation. We have a political action committee. We have an educational component. But we're in Minneapolis, where a lot of neurology really got formalized and started. And when you think of professional medical associations, you really think of Chicago, and you think of Washington, D.C. So until I went to GIN specifically for guidelines, I really didn't have much of, I was a little sheltered, but I didn't have much of a clue of what else was happening in the community, and was fortunate to attend a number of the international conferences, and then certainly the EGAPS conference that has been taking place over the past couple of years now. We're planning for the third conference. I see GIN as validation of some of the work that the Academy has done, again in our little microcosm, but it's really stretched us in the development, dissemination, and implementation of our guidelines and our methodologies, thinking just beyond what we've always done and why we've done it, and hearing a lot of great presentations and learning from a lot of esteemed leaders in the field who in many cases have now become colleagues. And I think GIN has a little bit of everything for everybody, whether you're in development or dissemination or implementation. If you're a staff person like me and like Sandy was at a professional medical association, if you're at a payer or a large healthcare system, if you are a physician who really geeks out on guideline development and methodology, or if you are a researcher, health sciences researcher, there's something for everybody in GIN, and there's really value in having each of these disciplines contribute to the network. So I hope that I am able to continue to participate, and am honored and flattered to be able to lead alongside Sandy and work with a lot of leaders like Marguerite and Rich that have come before us.
Thank you, Sandy and Tom. So I hope that's helpful for others, just to get a slightly different perspective. I just feel if I'm having the conversation, it's my bias, and having others, hearing from others, I think is really helpful. So the next thing I thought we might just go through the website and take you through to see the scope of resources available. So we go back to the home page, which is the next slide, and then there are tabs obviously across the top, and then we would go into the resources tab, which is the next slide, and there you see, and it's hard to see the list again because of the screenshot. But the resources range from, and the biggest resource obviously is the guideline library, and the next couple of slides is actually taking you through that. And within the guideline, it's not just guidelines within the guideline library. There are evidence reports, there are different documents ranging, all focusing obviously on guidelines and the evidence, but they're not strictly all guidelines. And sometimes you might get other information, which is often useful when you are looking for guidelines anyway. So, but the other activities are access to the webinars, access to promotional slides, past conference slides, other tools and resources, links to checklists, and so there's a depth of other resources within the GIN website. So this is the next slide is the search function, and I've chosen asthma, just was easy to choose, just to show how it worked. And so you can see there's over 6,000 documents in the library, and the Sandy, you can go to the next slide, and the quick search for asthma showed, I think I got 73 references to asthma, and these are documents that have been provided by the organisational members of GIN. Now, in terms of the guidelines, more recently within GIN, and it is a voluntary activity, but the GIN published a paper some years ago on standards of guidelines, so similar to IOM, similar to the standards that NHMRC have around guidelines. In fact, the NHMRC are veering more toward the GIN standards for their guidelines, and there is a checkbox that the organisations can look at their guidelines and see, it's self-reported to see whether they meet those standards. And it's another way of being able, if you've got your guideline on the website and somebody can see that you have completed that checklist, it's that in a sense that you have you're complying with a standard, although it's not checked, and I guess people could play that system, but one would hope it didn't, and it was a way of perhaps encouraging guideline developers to know that there are standards that are acceptable for or required for development of guidelines. And so, again, it's another incentive, if you like, that GIN's putting in place. And so the depth of the resources, they're all available to everyone. The guideline library, in fact, is free to low and middle income countries, just while we're talking about resources. And here is GIN working as, if you like, a good corporate citizen in supporting areas where perhaps there is a lack of that information available, and wanting to support those regions. So that was just touching on the depth of the resources within the guideline. So the next, and this is more the partners and collaboration. We've had partners for a long time within GIN. I think that they were up till the last couple of years a little bit silent, but certainly a lot more activity in the last couple of years to engage and be proactive with our partners. The more recent partners is the partnership with Cochrane, which I think is fantastic. And last year at the Cochrane conference in Vienna, I was on the stand promoting GIN, and then we had Cochrane at Amsterdam also. So this very strong link with Cochrane. We have the Australasian Cochrane Centre in Melbourne, and I had the first meeting for the Australian New Zealand community in November, and Sally Green and Steve McDonald, who lead that, the Cochrane Centre, I had opportunity to have a meeting time, to be part of that conference, and really strengthening those relationships with Cochrane. So I think that into the future, that'll be a really, or is emerging as a very, very important partnership. There are other partnerships, and if we go into the next slide, Sandy, the other one that I think that is also, I want to put this up as an example, the partnership with McMaster, And the reason why this is important is the link that McMaster, the work that has been undertaken at McMaster is around the checklist for guideline and implementation that is available to everybody on the website to use. And so it's good for McMaster in terms of being able to disseminate work that they've done, and it's fabulous for the membership of GIN to have access to these tools as well. So, this is another nice example of that. There's partnerships with GRADE, partnerships with the World Medical Association, the partnership with the International Federation of Emergency Medicine, which I'm working closely with at the moment to look at guidelines, developing a methodology around guidelines in low and middle income countries for delivery of emergency care, and we're working on sepsis around that, which is very exciting. And so there are the opportunity to be engaged with these partners. So while it's not like a partner that might be out of reach also, in the partnerships within GIN is that these are individuals that also from these organisations that are at the conferences, that are part of the working groups. And so there are opportunities to be linking with all of these partners at a different level. And I think that that's something perhaps not thought about, but certainly available to people. So, again, another great opportunity and benefit in terms of that. And more recently, the collaboration with Dynamed. Dynamed is an associate member, but as such, they are also offering the opportunity to have access for some of the members to their tools as well. And for Dynamed, in their interest, they are getting, if you like, the tapping into the thinking of what's happening within the guideline space. And so there's benefit for both organisations within that partnership. GIN's very thorough around the partnerships and the development of partnerships. We go through quite a rigorous process at the board level in terms of determining those partnerships and making sure that both groups are getting benefit from those partnerships. And so, I think it's, again, this is GIN growing and becoming a more sophisticated organisation to support the kind of work around guidelines and improving healthcare internationally. So that's, I guess, and my last slide, and I think Sandy's going to talk more about that, which again, I keep saying it's exciting. I always get excited about it, but Philadelphia and the conference in Philadelphia. But before, I guess, we move on from that, I wondered whether, Sandy, did you want to take on questions, or how did you want to move forward from here?
Sure. So I have some questions that I've got listed here, but if anybody on the webinar has additional questions, please type them into the chat box in the lower left-hand corner, and I'll be happy to ask Sue these questions. In the meantime, Sue, I was wondering if you could go into a little bit more detail about individual membership versus organizational membership. I know you were the chair of the membership committee, and so you probably know this well, but can you describe what is available at each of those membership types and what is not available?
So the organisational membership depends on the size of the organisation. The smaller organisation that has the categories based on your employees. So if you're a big organisation like NHMRC, you're a large organisation and you pay a higher fee. If you're a smaller non-for-profit organisation, and the National Stroke Foundation in Australia qualified as a small they do a huge amount of work, but they've got a small number of employees, and they have a smaller rate in that. The benefits for both organisations, the only difference is the number of access to the website. So for the higher fee, you get up to 100 access. You can have 100 individuals or staff members access GIN and the website, be part of all of those working groups. And, I guess if I was a smart manager, I'd be saying, for the amount of money I'm paying for membership for GIN, and all my staff can have access to all of these activities that I don't need to further support because they've got access to internationally all of this stuff. It's a good financial arrangement, I think, and everybody's getting benefit from that. So when I put my manager's hat on, that's how I think about it. And so, the access to Cochrane is the same, the access to the working groups is the same. You have the only difference is representation on the board, and because organisations have, if you like, carry a bit more weight, so there's more representation from organisations, which I actually think is a good thing, but there are there is an individual representation on the board as well. And just recently there was a change made to make sure that the terms for both the individual and the organisational representatives or trustees on the board were the same period of time. And they increased that to 2 years, maybe 3, I can't remember now. But that really is to give people a chance on the board to really get their teeth into activities. So I'm not sure if others have been on the board, but if you only have a 12-month term, by the time you get into the swing of things, it's time to come off, and it's quite disjointed. And there was a lot of discussion about some continuity in being able to really see activities and projects through, and I think that was probably a very wise decision. But essentially, the benefits are the same for both individuals and organisational members. Organisations just can put their staff, gives access to their staff, and the staff have the same rights as other individual members.
Okay, thank you. So here's 2 questions, but they're related. Do community groups other than GIN North America have activities and conferences that you can tell us about? And what can be done to improve and promote more collaboration between the GIN regional communities?
Great questions. The only group that's having conferences, if you like, are GIN North America. Mainly it's, and I think this goes back to the support, and certainly the support and the collaboration that GIN North America has with other agencies as well. In Australia, we're new, we haven't started that, but part of our plan is to, because we're working, you and others, we're all working voluntarily, the best way to work is to work with other people and other groups. And so we look to partner with people in terms of conferences. So JBI, I don't know if others know, Joanna Briggs, they have a conference in October, and we will have time at that conference and get airtime, if you like, at that conference. So while we're small, that's the way that we plan to operate. GIN Nordic I'm not so aware of, but I don't believe that they've had a conference. They're quite a big group, so they meet and they have quite face-to-face meetings. We are generally virtual meetings, and we do a lot of contact through email. and other media forums. Gin Africa is just starting out, and Patrick, who chairs that, he's just been invited by the SAGE group, which is the group that is supporting evidence in, I can't remember what SAGE, the acronym stands for, I can't remember, and he's been invited to present at that conference. And so the way that they will work at the moment is they need to promote themselves and be invited to speak at conferences. It's a small group. There's, I think there's 7 of them on that group, and the other group I didn't mention was the Arab community. So that's run by Lubna, who's also on the Gin board, and then which has been again interesting because of some of the regional differences and being able to create. So sometimes it's almost like an implementation project where you have to create the awareness and the need for guidelines for people to realise that there's a problem or a gap, and then start working through that process as you would with an implementation project. And the Arab group, that's where they're at. They're a small group and they're starting to be established. But certainly learning from each other is really important, and we did discuss sharing the information from this webinar, and I know that when Catherine Marshall and I did a previous webinar that others heard and listened to that, and we had a joint workshop or presentation at the Amsterdam conference that Sandy led, again to share kind of the learnings from all of the different communities. But if anybody's got any suggestions, we'd love to hear them.
Well, thanks. I think it was actually Marguerite Koster who was representing us at that session, and she did a great job and is chair at that time, or maybe she was recent past chair at that time. She certainly had the experience, and Marguerite is on this call. She is on this webinar, I should say. She has also, I think, done a phenomenal job, and I hope that we can continue this, to reach out to other communities to share some of our resources that we've developed in the North America community. We did get a jump start on everybody else, and we started small too. But these groups do grow, and our membership list now, well, it's not actually a membership list. I shouldn't use that word so loosely. But our mailing list is over 700 email addresses and growing. Every time I send out an announcement, I get several requests for additional emails to be added. So people who are on this webinar or people who are listening to this webinar, if you are not on our mailing list and you'd like to be, please send your email address to me. If you are on the email and you know others who might be interested in an upcoming webinar or some of the work that we do, please just forward those announcements on to them, and if they're interested, I can add their emails as well for future announcements. And that would go for people who are international too, although we do have some technological limitations with regard to participation live on the webinars. But the international folks can certainly download the archived webinars from the website.
So Sandy, one of the things that we have started to do, and this came out of our first meeting when we had the conference in Melbourne, and again it's about showing the value of collaboration and connection. And so we're starting to gather more of the good news stories where guidelines work, and particularly where they've made a financial benefit. Because if we want to influence agencies and governments, those types of groups about that the work that we do is important, we actually have to demonstrate that guidelines have made a difference. And the most common story that we talk about is the increasing the use of magnesium folate for to reduce, I don't know it well enough, but it's reducing prematurity in babies, which has made amazing savings, both in for the outcomes for the babies, but also in a financial term. And that was written up in the Medical Journal of Australia. So this opportunity to really start saying, well, actually, the work we do does make a difference, and how can we support that ongoing work through this collaboration. So we're starting to look at gathering those stories across the region, and people come to me and say, oh yes, I just happened to have a conversation with somebody and told them what we had achieved and I got a grant. And sometimes it depends on who you talk to. It's not always putting submissions in. Sometimes there's some serendipitous luck in all of this as well. And so we're just, starting to gather some of that information and the narrative, if you like, about what works and what a difference it made and how people can learn, and, how did people do that as well. So we're only starting, but we're collecting them.
Well, I think that's excellent, and sort of in that same vein of collaboration that goes across regions, I want to address the working groups of GIN for a minute, because as you say, there are quite a few now, and just about anybody who's involved in our organization would probably be interested in one or more of those topic areas. So can you give us a little bit of your recommendations on how people can get involved in the working groups? First of all, should they get involved? If you're not an accomplished person in that area, but you're really just more interested in learning more about it, should you become a member of the working group, or should you have some other way of learning about the activities and the products of the working group? And then if you are going to get personally involved, how would you recommend they do that?
So the working groups, I think it is that entree into a topic sometimes that you are interested in and know not a lot about. And my personal experience is I'm really interested in the overdiagnosis space. I don't really know a lot about it. I went to the breakfast meeting in Amsterdam, and Paul Glasio, who leads this work, is one of the leaders in evidence-based medicine internationally, and we're now all working together on this project. And there's a whole lot of skills I don't have, but what I can do is collate information and pull information together, and that's what I'm doing as part of this my contribution to that working group. Whereas in other working groups, the implementation working group, I've got much more expertise around that, and I wouldn't regard myself as a novice for that group. So it's you find your own level, if you like, and and some of the groups are large, and it's being kept up to date, and you'll get information from the groups and learn through that, and there might be a topic. One of the accelerated guidelines groups recently sent out a survey, and it's contributing to the survey, and then that survey will form part of a paper. So just that your contribution to that survey as being part of that working group. Being part of the performance measures group, again, there are different people who with different levels of experience in that space, but also it's they're also looking for individuals who will give them some commentary on what they're doing, because I think commentary is really important. It develops much better products because you're getting a different view around that. So that's another way that you can contribute to that. And joining, it's as easy as on the website for the working groups there may be a contact email, or if there isn't, it's an email to the Secretariat at GIN. I'm really interested in this working group. Would you mind putting me in contact with so-and-so? And it's as easy as that. There's the only formality really around a working group is that they do generally have a steering group, and the steering group, as I touched on earlier, just very cautious about conflicts of interest, that all of those conflicts of interest are declared. If you are active in a particular piece of work that's going to be published, your conflicts or disclosure of interest will be requested so that there's protection for you and for GIN in that piece of work. But it's not onerous. It's only if it's a discrete piece of work around that. And you do as much as you want when you've got the capacity to be involved.
Very good, thank you. You had been a member of, or I think you chaired the membership committee. So are there other committees, and are there opportunities for people to get involved in committees of GIN?
And another great question. There are other committees that are starting to be established. The membership committee was the first that had more broad EOI out to the community. That was something that I'd instigated, and initially that the membership committee was nominated by the board, but for me that wasn't giving a true representation or giving an opportunity for the network to be engaged. And there are now, that is certainly more of the philosophy of GIN, and I can't remember committees at the moment, but certainly they're advertised in Engine, or the Secretariat sends out notices for those activities. I think one of the things is when the opportunity when nomination for the board comes up, that if you are interested in that, it's often better that be able to demonstrate you've been engaged in some GIN activities, either in the working groups or the communities around that as well.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sue. This has been a very interesting webinar. I've enjoyed it. I'm sure the others have as well. It's important for us to learn what all the opportunities are so that we can take advantage of more and more of these, and to learn about what's available and share with others and increase our networking and so forth. So this was excellent, and I thank you very much. But before we close this webinar, I would like to remind the individuals who are on the call that this webinar will be archived and accessible on the website in about 1 week. And there are other resources from our North American community, as you saw, that are on the website. So please do spend some time kind of exploring and see what's there, learn a little bit more about our history, what we do, activities we have coming up, and so forth. And on that note, another thing we have coming up, which I want to remind everybody about, is our open meeting of the full North American community during the Philadelphia conference. So the date, time, and location has not yet been determined, but it will be soon, and I'll be sending that out in the announcements. So please keep a watch for that, and please do try to attend that conference. Thank you so much, everyone. We enjoyed having you on the webinar, and we look forward to your participating on the next one. And thanks again to our presenter, Sue Hugsson.